the words of liberty as we read aloud the Declaration of Independence. And for that, it is my great honor to introduce to you a very distinguished group of individuals who will read the Declaration. First, as you heard from David Ferriero, the four descendants of our Founding Fathers who are here today: Laura Bellman, please stand, John Bellman, Laura Murphy, and Michael Miller. Now, of course, folks, we cannot have just the Declaration of Independence because we had some grievances against King George III. And so for that, we have the leaders of the Second Continental Congress. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Thomas Jefferson. Mr. John Adams. And Dr. Benjamin Franklin. Now, these three gentlemen know the words of the Declaration better than anyone else. Mr. Jefferson, of course, wrote the first draft. Mr. Adams and Dr. Franklin, well, they made a couple of changes to it. And finally, to read the names of the 56 signers, those men who signed this grand declaration, we are happy to welcome Private Edward Ned Hector of the Free Black Colonial Soldier. He is a respected patriot and hero. He is a veteran of the 3rd Pennsylvania Artillery Company. He was noted, by the way, for his courage during the Revolutionary War, when he refused to let his wagon, his team, and his armaments fall into enemy hands. And he was quoted as saying, "The enemy shall not have my team. I will save the horses or perish myself." So we'll ask all of these folks to come up. And ladies and gentlemen, the Declaration of Independence.
In Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous Declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness.
Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security.
Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies. and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world.
He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good.
He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation until his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them.
He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only.
He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures.
He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people.
He has refused for a long time after such dissolutions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within.
He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands.
He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers.
He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries.
He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance.
He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislature.
He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power.
He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rules into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever.
He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us.
He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people.
He is, at this time, transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation.
He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands.
He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions.
In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people.
Nor have we been wanting in attention to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They, too, have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends.
We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them, and that the great state of Britain is and ought to totally be dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do.
And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
Thank you. Thank you very much to Laura Bellman, to John Bellman, to Michael Miller, descendants of the founding fathers of the Declaration of Independence, and to Laura Murphy from the Daughters of the American Revolution, to Mr. Jefferson, to Mr. Adams, to Dr. Franklin. Thank you. Those were the words heard 236 years ago. Send the message to King George. Private Hector will now read the names of the colonies and the signers of the Declaration of Independence. There were 56 signers, 13 original colonies. Now, in colonial times, as you heard from the stage during the course of the morning, there is the traditional, well, how does it go? Huzzah! Huzzah! So, here's a test for all of you. After Private Hector reads the names of the signers from each of the states 13 times, we want your approval. So let's test it out. Let's hear a hearty huzzah. Huzzah! What do you think?
Didn't hear it at all.
I tell you what, if you don't do a better job, you're going to go sing God Save the Queen. Let's try it one more time. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Huzzah! Okay, you can all stay Americans.
It will be my pleasure to read the names of these men who were said to be signing their death warrant. At the end of each, if you feel compelled to cheer for your particular state, don't hold back. First, to the President of the Continental Congress, John Hancock. Huzzah! Georgia, Button Gwinnett, Lyman Hall, and George Walton. Huzzah! North Carolina, William Hoops, Joseph Hughes, and John Penn. Huzzah! South Carolina, Edward Rutledge, Thomas Hayward, Jr., Thomas Lynch, Jr., and Arthur Middleton. Huzzah! Maryland, Samuel Chase, William Pica, Thomas Stone, and Charles Carroll of Carrollton. Huzzah! Virginia, George Wythe, Richard Henry Lee, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Harrison, Thomas Nelson, Jr., Francis Lightfoot Lee, and Carter Braxton. Huzzah! Pennsylvania, Robert Morris, Benjamin Rush, Benjamin Franklin, John Morton, George Clymer, James Smith, George Taylor, James Wilson, and George Ross. Huzzah! Delaware, Caesar Rodney, George Reed, and Thomas McKean. Huzzah! New York, William Floyd, Philip Livingston, Francis Lewis, and Lewis Morris. Huzzah! New Jersey, Richard Stockton, John Witherspoon, Francis Hopkinson, John Hart, and Abraham Clark. Huzzah! New Hampshire, Josiah Bartlett, Matthew Thornton, William Whipple. Huzzah! Massachusetts, Samuel Adams, John Adams, Robert Treat Payne, and Elbridge Derry. Huzzah! Rhode Island, Stephen Hopkins and William Ellery. Huzzah! Connecticut, Roger Sherman, Samuel Huntington, William Williams, and Oliver Wolcott. Huzzah! Let's give them the ultimate of huzzahs. 3 huzzahs. Hip, hip, huzzah! Hip, hip, huzzah! Hip, hip, huzzah! Well done.
Private Hector, thank you. Very well done. Another round of applause. That was fabulous. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, before we conclude the program, a couple of reminders. If you want to view the Declaration of Independence or the Charters of Freedom in the building behind me, the archives will remain open until 7 o'clock this evening. Also, there are a number of family activities during the course of this afternoon. Some people that we want to thank as we wrap up our program: to the Foundation of the National Archives, to all of our special readers, to the distinguished guests here on the stage, to the American Historical Theater and our founding fathers. One more time: Dr. Franklin, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson. We would like to thank the 3rd United States Infantry, the Old Guard, and John Hancock Financial for their support of this program. And of course, one final round of applause to the staff and volunteers of the National Archives who have been putting this on for 30+ years. Thank you. On behalf of all of us here today, we wish you a wonderful 4th of July. Enjoy the festivities around Washington, D.C. And before we let you go, it is my pleasure to reintroduce the lovely voice of Olivia Vogt.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, God shed his grace on thee and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.